Attracting top talent, especially in tech, often requires companies to offer a remote work option. So, more companies are allowing employees to work remote. Some are even going to a 100% remote workforce with no office available. Lisa Walker with Fuse is with us here to talk about this new concept. And, Lisa, how much demand are you guys seeing from companies that are wanting to do this?
So there's about, the last estimate I saw was 100 companies in the US going 100% remote. So we're really at the beginning here. More what we're seeing right now is a hybrid approach where people are dipping their toe in and they're allowing some remote work, but it's really the bold companies that are taking that step to go 100%, and we're just at the beginning of that. And those companies tend to be newer companies, tend to be software or services companies. So I think it's a lot easier when you're thinking about doing it from the start versus taking a company that's been around for a while and doing that massive transition. So I think we'll see that as we move forward, but we're at the beginning where you're seeing newer companies who are able to spin up remote in their DNA from the very beginning.
And one of the companies that Fuse has helped move to a fully remote setup is eGenera. It's a cloud services company, and Scott Harris is the CEO of eGenera. So, Scott, tell us about how your company was set up first and how that impacted your move to going 100% remote.
So it used to be that the two divisions of eGenera were very polarized, right? The cloud, the newer cloud division was almost always pretty remote, because everything's in a data center and these guys are in and out of them and traveling around. So, and they tend to do a lot of tech support. Everything's 24/7. So as you can imagine, that lended itself quickly to doing work from home. However, the flip side, sort of the older group, the software development group, had always been tied to offices all over the world. And sort of the last big one that we had was actually in Massachusetts. And it got to the point where we sort of looked at it and we said, okay, if this is something we can essentially outsource, we can use all the tools and the knowledge that we have on the service side and essentially help us get out of that location and get that group to a virtual workforce also, which really helped because we were having like sort of two cultures, for lack of better words. And the developers really, I think, wanted to get to that same culture, and there's obviously advantages, and having them work so closely together sort of made it a little bit of a sort of two silos that didn't really gel well all the time from that perspective.
Okay, Scott, so you guys have been all remote for just over 4 months now. So talk a little bit about how it's going.
The beginning part, you got the typical, how do I manage my employees, because I'm not used to it. We had a lot of processes in place, which they adopted, and more or less that worked. So we sort of took the processes from one side and applied them to the other. We saw a lot of what used to be very large, very long meetings start to get fractioned off into smaller, independent, more frequent meetings. So some people meet 3 or 4 times a week with smaller groups now, whereas they used to meet once for 3 hours, which I think is a more efficient way to do it anyways. So I'm very happy with that, but that tends to be what you end up getting, because it's just easier to manage virtually, because you don't have to have, okay, well, everyone knows they have to be in at this time that day in order for us all to get together physically. You can really sort of manage it to everyone's schedule a little bit better.
Okay, so Lisa, switching back to you here, will you expand a little bit on some of the challenges that you guys see with the companies that you're helping to move to this new way of operating?
The biggest challenge we see with remote workers is isolation and feelings of disengagement with the company. So that communications platform sits really at the centerpiece of your remote work tech stack. If you're not thinking about how remote employees are going to communicate and collaborate and be productive, you're going to have a problem. So when we're working with customers, they typically come to us with 6 to 8 communications apps spread across the organization. And what they're trying to do is get to a place where they can have one tool for all of their employees to call, meet, chat, and share on any device from anywhere they choose to work. And that doesn't mean at home. It could be in a coffee shop. They could choose to go into a co-working space every few days. But giving your employees one tool to use across the company is one really simple thing you can do to bring people together and give them a way to feel connected. One of the other things we've seen from a tech standpoint that's really interesting are some of the uses of VR and actually giving employees more of a VR experience where they're in 3D and there is that virtual water cooler. So this communication piece, we're just at the beginning of that as well, but getting people the right tools to communicate and feel engaged throughout the day is really important. And also, again, it's counterintuitive, but taking the time to get them together in person, whether that's once a year, the whole company offsite, whether that's empowering managers and giving them budget to lead teams and bring them together offsite and in person a couple times a year, it's really important to take some of those cost savings and invest back in making sure your employees are engaged and they feel connected.
Okay, and finally, Scott, you guys seem to be pleased with the setup thus far, and it's working out for you. So, especially considering how you were originally organized, any advice for companies that may be looking to move to a similar model?
In the end, had we not had stuff set up with Fuse ahead of time, it would have been much more challenging. Had we not had sort of our other division, which specializes in migrating workloads to the cloud, again, that would have been more challenging too. And had we also not had some of the processes and sort of best practices set up for that other side of the business, it would have been harder. So we did it in a matter of months because we had those. So I think if you're trying to do it quick, especially, you got to make sure you got your partners set up and lined up first, because if you don't have that expertise, it's going to be a lot harder to get there.